Hello, friend, and welcome to episode 9 of my 31-day challenge, where I'm answering your questions about creating a career or a business that you love. And in today's episode, I'm going to tackle the big one, the question on every creative's lips, especially in the VR industry. How on earth do you make money with original work? I'm going to be diving into that in this episode. If you've got a question, hit me up. Ask it to me on any of the socials. Alex Makes VR is the handle. If you've got a longer question, email me, alexmakesvr@gmail.com. And if you want to be notified every day when these episodes go live, then you can subscribe to the newsletter at alexmakesvr.com. I also put out in that newsletter a bit of a breakdown of what I cover in the episode. So sometimes nice to just have a little reminder, or a little preview, or a little ooh, that one's not for me. Either way, sign up there. So the big one, how do you make money with original work? Now, this episode is obviously going to be very much based on personal experience, and it by no means covers every aspect of how you can make money with original work. But I'm definitely going to be drawing from my own experience. Specifically, I'm going to be drawing from my own experience of making money from a 360 original piece. So, obviously, if you are more of a game-based VR creator, you have very different potential revenue streams with, putting it on the Oculus or the Steam store, or licensing it to VR arcades, that kind of thing. So this episode is really going to be focused, though, on my personal experience, and it's drawing from a more original work more of like a storytelling, I guess, kind of original work, like something where, I've written the script, I'm dictating what the piece looks like, or what the content involves. So basically, original work, I guess, is anything that's not being dictated by a client. When you have the power to decide everything about that project, you're creating your own intellectual property, and that's what this comes down to. That's really what any original work is, right? It's your own IP. So how do you make money from original VR work? So for me, there's been a few different kind of realizations that I've had, and the landscape today in 2020 looks very, very different to when I kind of first started to push my original work through different distribution channels, which was in late 2017, early 2018 was when I first released my first VR drama. So for me, Key to Like, which was my first kind of VR original, which was a 360 drama, that basically I kind of gave it its festival run, and then as soon as it had kind of got some kind of press, some kind of momentum behind it, that's when I started to put feelers out about selling it. And when I say selling it, I don't mean like I wanted someone to just come in and bid for it and then it's theirs. No, I mean like trying to push it out to different distribution channels. So the first distribution channel that I wanted to go down the route of was online distribution. Now, naturally, we're living in a world where, if you want to get the most exposure possible, then absolutely you're going to try and get your piece on as many headsets worldwide as possible. For me, that came in the form of getting my project on some of the most popular apps for 360 videos. So back then, that was Jaunt, that was Inception, and that was Iconic Engine, before they kind of turned into, I think it was called Digital Domain before they kind of turned into more of like a licensing agent, I guess, as Iconic Engine. But anyway, so those were the kind of the main platforms that and obviously these projects were sent to those platforms on a licensing agreement. So what that meant is some of them would pay an upfront fee, a small fee, never more than kind of $500. And then you would supposedly get a revenue split if they were to ever kind of sell it on to be used at a VR cinema, for example, or license it into a telecoms like original app or something like that. So that was the idea of like those agreements. Now for me, that never really came to anything. Like, it was a very, very menial amount of money that came through those channels, which is a shame because obviously you'd think that an online distributor would be the way to go. But obviously people who have headsets at home, unless it's changed a little bit now, but unless it's like game-based content, they're very unlikely to pay to watch 360 content. I mean, you look at the moment, I'd say probably the best distributor for brilliant high-end 360 originals is probably Within. And I'm not sure how their agreement works because I've never licensed anything to Within, but I'm sure it's either like a small upfront fee or some kind of licensing deal. But the thing is, you don't pay to watch anything on Within. So it's hard to think that there's ever going to be like a massive amount of money you can make through that model. So that's a real shame, obviously, because, if you think about the film, like the traditional film world, you would create a film, and then if you could get it into the hands of the right distributor, or if you could like put it on Amazon's, not Prime, but the service where someone can like pay to watch your film, you could put it on like YouTube's premium, I can't remember what it's called, like the store where people could buy your film from that, or Vimeo's like premiere thing. So there's like options for like traditional filmmakers to start generating some revenue by putting it up on online platforms. But for 360 creators, that's not necessarily the best thing to do. You can obviously put it out and generate kind of interest. I've never put Key to Like or any of my original 360 pieces really on YouTube or Facebook. And that's because I want to make sure that when people are watching my work, they're watching it in a headset. And the vast majority of people that are watching 360 content on YouTube and Facebook are not watching it in a headset. So that's my personal preference. For you, you might choose to put it on YouTube, and obviously you can monetize a little bit through that with AdSense, although obviously you'd need like a lot of views to be able to kind of make anywhere near the kind of money that would sustain you as an original creator. So when I realised quite quickly that the the kind of licensing deal online wasn't necessarily going to be the way to make money as a 360 kind of original piece, the next option that I explored was pop-up VR cinemas. Now, obviously, right now in this climate, that's going to be really, really hard to do. And it's going to be really difficult to reach out to anyone because no one's really doing them. I don't know anyone that's got plans to do them because everything is on hold whilst we're in this COVID situation. But if you were to put on your own VR cinema when social distancing not a thing, and we're living in a world where people won't be scared to interact with each other or wear a headset in some kind of space, potentially a location-based screening, just like the early days of cinema, is a really good way to go. Now, again, if you reach out to someone who puts on VR cinemas, you might make a little bit of money. I think the most that we got paid for a screening for Key to Like was £150, which was, I think they showed the film like for 2 or 3 days for that price. So, if you manage to get loads of them lined up, then all of a sudden that starts to look quite good. But realistically, the best way would probably be to put on your own. Now, that can sound quite scary. And if you don't want to be in the business of distributing your own content, if you don't want to be in the business of having to put on your own VR cinemas, then absolutely, it makes total sense. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but you would think that it would be not very financially viable, but actually, if you manage to negotiate a good rate on like hiring a space, and it doesn't have to be anywhere particularly fancy, like, but say for example, if you do a deal with your like local independent cinema to use their spare room or something, or the local art gallery, anywhere, that just any kind of like, probably ideally like an artsy type or a kind of recreational type space, just because then you're more likely to kind of pull in people that would be going to that space anyway. But you could put on your own cinemas and charge, £5 to £10 a ticket to experience some VR content. And that all of a sudden becomes quite a viable way to make your money back. And funnily enough, with that, the reason I like doing that, I mean, I don't personally put on my own, but I curate and facilitate a pop-up VR cinema in collaboration with a space and the BFI. So that is like my version of that. But the reason I quite like that is not only because, you're going to make a lot more money than distributing it online, but also you're getting that direct feedback from your audience. You're actually there with them when they experience your film. And that's really exciting. I can't tell you how much I learned about 360 directing and editing and kind of what audience do and don't like. I can't tell you how much I learned from doing those kind of cinemas, because you're there with the audience. You can see them react. You can see them like spinning around, or you can see like some of them reacting to something and some of them not. So you start to get a really good idea of like creatively as well, like what people think of your work. And so you're like going straight to the source and understanding whether you're doing it not right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong, but you can get a good idea about what audiences think. So that's really, really handy. So that is potentially something to explore. The next way that you can kind of make money from your original work, and this is by far the most lucrative, is by packaging it with a workshop. So this is where you start to get into the significant amount of money. So this is where I started to realize that I wasn't probably ever going to make, loads of money. And not that Keylight it wasn't intended as a piece to make lots of money, but it became obvious quite quickly. No one was just going to reach out with a Netflix licensing deal and be like, we'll buy this for, however many thousand. When I started to actually see some like really kind of interesting amounts of money off the back of the original work, was when I started packaging it as a masterclass or a workshop. So I would go to an event, or I would be asked by like a university or a film group or a research body, or I'm trying to think like maybe a production company, like various kind of different people that might be interested in getting into VR or might be just interested in experiencing it. But they would also want to understand the process behind it. They'd want access to you to ask you questions about why you did certain things. So what I started to do was to package the film so people could experience Key to Like. But then what they were really paying for was to hear me talk about the process of writing it, the process that we went through to make it, my experience with producing it, and the money involved with it, and getting into festivals, and the state of VR storytelling, and my predictions for the future, and all of those kind of good stuff. So really what they were paying for wasn't necessarily to see the film, but because of the film, it positioned me as an expert in the field of VR storytelling, which allowed me to then start to make some pretty good money as, I guess you would say, like a kind of a speaker or a workshop leader and that kind of thing. And it wasn't like hands-on workshops. It wasn't like I was, a full day thing where I was teaching them how to use 360 cameras or, setting them tasks on writing VR scripts. It wasn't anything like that. It was just me talking for usually an hour or two. And having that interaction, that Q&A with audiences. So that by far was for me like the kind of the best way. Now, the last way is probably the most obvious way, and it's not an answer that people are going to like, but this is how I started to really, really make money with that original work. And yes, technically, it's not the original work that I'm making money with, but it's the original work that I'm making money because of, and that is to use your original work to scratch that passion itch, scratch that kind of itch of what you actually want to be doing, because often as a creator you can be sucked into client work and or work that's being dictated kind of to you. So you got to scratch that itch, you got to make sure that you are happy doing what you're doing, and then using that piece as a profile booster. So for me, I think I talked about in one of the other episodes, I spent thousands of my own, and when I say my own, I mean the bank's, money on Key to Like. I sunk thousands into making it, even though, it's funny that it cost thousands, because literally everyone pretty much, gave their time for free, and it was more like just the cost of things like insurance and equipment and catering and taxis and all the bits and bobs that go into a production. It still cost thousands, even though everyone was kind enough to give their time, but because of the profile that piece got me, because of the fact that this was something different, this was something new, this was something exciting, it positioned me as an expert. It positioned me as someone that knew what they were doing with VR storytelling, which is pretty hilarious considering that was literally the first piece I'd ever done that was VR storytelling. Off the back of that arguably has gone on to make me hundreds of thousands, because that is the thing that basically catapulted me into some kind of commercial success. So because all of a sudden I had this piece under my belt, and also I'd proven that, I was confident enough in this technology and in this medium for storytelling that I was willing to put my own money, I would put my own ass on the line, basically. All of a sudden I was given a lot more opportunities that I absolutely wouldn't have got if I hadn't done that piece. And because of the fact that I was speaking, because of the fact I was getting asked to come and talk on panels and come and give keynotes and come and do workshops, because all of a sudden, my name was being swished around everywhere, that made me so much more appealing to brands to work with. So all of a sudden, these big name brands were they were very not only open to working with me, but when they want to do something in VR, they're well, let's look for the person who's leading the charge. Let's look for someone that has the social proof that they know what they're doing. And that happened to be me. And so the biggest way that I've made money with my original work isn't actually from the original work itself. Now, that I know that that's a cop-out answer, but that is the truth. And for anyone that knows the other creative industries, you will know that 99.9% of people do not make their sole income from their original work. I remember having dinner with a friend last year, and she was telling me that a friend of hers is quite a prolific English film director. He does some big independent feature films. He's like a household name in England. So you would expect that, he's set, right? I mean, he just makes feature films. I'm sure BAFTA are just throwing money at him. He's not applying for any grants. He's just getting he's getting film investors coming to him, signing checks without even thinking. No. In fact, the opposite. In fact, he has just as much of a hard time getting things signed off and having to push through original work. And actually, he would do, I think it was a case of he would do one commercial job one year, and then whilst they were getting the funding through for this for feature films, and then the next year he would do the feature film, and then the following year he would do big commercial jobs, and then the next year he would do feature, and it's that seesaw. And that's purely because there is just more money in commercial work, like full stop. I mean, that's going to be no surprise to anyone. So I would say that if you're someone that really wants to make money with your original work, I'd really think about like how much you want to make. And obviously, again, this comes back to episode 1. If you can live on a very small amount of money, if you can live on like, I don't know, $1,000 a month, or, you know, $2,000 a month, if that's all you're looking to make, that becomes very, very feasible with an original project. Because if you combined your original work with some pop-up cinemas, some workshops, and then maybe like got a couple of licensing deals, you would probably make that amount like per month if that was all you were doing, and you put your time and effort into marketing it that way and make it, you know, kind of organizing the pop-ups. The thing is, it's like, I feel like when people want to make money with their original work, what they really want to do is they want to make original work and then they want to hand it off to someone, and then they never have to do anything again. And this is what I see like across all creative industries. It doesn't really matter whether you're in film or music or VR or like illustration. It doesn't matter. Like, people have this idea in their head that, you know, they're just gonna be able to like get paid to do whatever the hell they want. And, you know, if you are that person, then please do your own podcast and I will be your first subscriber, because my goodness, like there's even like famous anecdotes of people. Was it Scorsese that recently had a film on Netflix? In fact, I'm fairly certain it was the one with all of the famous old dudes in it. I never actually watched it. I think like Robert De Niro and some other old dudes were in it. I don't know. I never watched it, but I did watch a round table with a load of commissioning executives, because I'm cool like that. That's the kind of, if you looked at my YouTube feed, it's just a lot of business and a lot of round tables. But it was really good. It was one that I think it was the Hollywood Reporter did it. It was just like a bunch of commissioning executives from Netflix and Amazon and traditional broadcasters. I think like Disney was there, like, and ABC and like some American broadcasters. But anyway, on that, I think Netflix was saying how, you know, Scorsese had been shopping that film around for like 10 years or something. And it was like a real risk for Netflix to fund it, because every other major film funder or distribution channel had said no. But they were like, well, it's worth the risk because it's Scorsese. But, you know, it was not a cheap film to make. And they themselves were doing it as a loss leader to kind of get Scorsese on board. I think it was Scorsese. Don't hold me to that though, but I'm fairly certain. I feel like I probably should have fact checked that before I started talking about this anecdote. But that in itself tells you, right? It's like, this is one of the most famous film directors of all time. And even he can't get his projects greenlit and do whatever he wants, you know, all the time. So I feel like absolutely there is scope to make money with your original work. Just have to be a little bit clever about it. The big overarching thing, and this is something that I've not done personally, but this is what I would do if I had some kind of IP that lent itself to, I don't know, let's say it's like an IP that's like a superhero IP, or is some kind of drama, or maybe it's like a specific format that you're like pioneering. The beauty of creating something like that is you can branch out the IP into lots of different things. So I always tell my friend who's a musician, like, the money's in the merch. Like, that's so obvious to me, and that's like the way that all kind of creative industries are going. Who do you think funds films other than, you know, distributors that can get money from cinemas and things like that? It's advertising money. It's like, essentially, it's like why branded content exists, right? It's like the whole point of it is to sell something at the end of the day. It's either to, what do they say? They say if you're not paying, then you're the product. So it's either Netflix is funding something because they want you to pay their subscription fee, or, I don't know, or Foxlight is funding something because they're going to get a portion of the ticket sales plus thingy. But God, I'm really rambling right now. But let's say like something like Frozen. In fact, I think Disney, full stop, they're like, the amount of money they make from actually the films and the TV shows is very, very small. But the amount they make from the merchandise, like Frozen, I think was the most amount of money they've ever made from a single IP. And that's because everyone was obsessed with buying the dolls and the dresses, and you know, it had such massive revenue streams from like the physical stuff that came out of that IP, not the movie itself. So maybe if you're creating an original IP as well, maybe think of it that way, because I mean, one day I really want to do that, but right now that's not really, I don't really have an idea for an IP that would branch out like that. But, you know, the idea being you build some kind of IP that you could then sell T-shirts for, or maybe, I mean, to be fair, the next original project I'm doing, I'm toying with the idea of doing like an original kind of like graphic novel that goes with it. Because it is that kind of vibe, it's that kind of style. And so then we would like sell the graphic novel or the comic, whatever it ends up being, at the screenings, and then that could potentially be a revenue source. So I guess it's also thinking about like outside the box. So either you're selling your time, or either you're making money from your time with things like packaging it as a workshop or packaging it as a as a profile builder for your services, or you can sell kind of stuff off the back of it. And that's the way I would think about it, really. I hope that was insightful. That's really, at the moment where we're at with VR, there isn't really a massive amount of scope with selling your original work and making money from it. Those are really the key things. Like I say, for game-based stuff, obviously, then you've got the options of VR arcades, which are quite profitable from what I gather, and you could sell, you can sell it directly on the Oculus and Steam store. But the thing is, if you've got a 360 video, the way that the ecosystem's been built for the last few years, people at the moment don't pay for that kind of content. So until someone like Amazon or Netflix actually has a VR kind of original strand where they might be commissioning work or buying up content, buying it outright, for example, for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds, like then until we're there, you're probably not likely to be able to sell it on something like an Oculus store. I could be wrong, and I'm very happy to be proven wrong. That's just my kind of gut, and from speaking to a lot of 360 creators and from being plugged into all those networks, I've not heard of a single person that's made a substantial amount of money from doing that. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you've got a question, please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. Email address, alexmakesvr@gmail.com. If you want to sign up for the daily reminders when these episodes go live, sign up to the newsletter at alexmakesvr.com. Should we check in with the step count? Whew, what are we at? 15,000. To be fair, I was at 12,000 when I started. So, not to flaunt it, but if you've not got your steps in, get moving. And I'll speak to you tomorrow.